Today, I want to dedicate this podcast to suffering hearts around the world, whether you are in famine, flood, fire, maybe even just feeling the loneliness of your life or your heart, wishing you were in relationship or being hurt in relationship. I just hope that in this moment you can feel love coming from me, that you can feel that hope inside of you that is there in the divinity in your soul, and my soul stretching to yours, offering you love. I hope you can feel that. So this podcast is dedicated to you, and please know that I will be sending you love throughout the day, just thinking about whoever you are, wherever you are, and what is going on for you. I will be sending you love radiating from my heart directly to your spirit. Mediumship changed everything in my life for me. Before mediumship began in my life, before I was awakened to the understanding of what our spirit is and how our spirit continues on, I lived kind of in a shadow of myself, in a shadow of the world. I lived basically in a state of reacting to things. How does this affect me? How does this look for me? How does this make me feel? What do they think about me? What am I doing? How am I building? How am I creating? And when my life broke down from a series of trauma, and literally a crack is where the light comes in, everything started shifting. When spirits started showing up in my world, in my night, when I would be sleeping at night, when I would be awake at night, it's where it began. If you've listened to other episodes, I do talk about this in Trauma Before Transformation. But before that happened, I lived a life that was fun in many ways, that was great in many ways. I survived with a lot of anxiety all the time. But mediumship changed everything because it opened the possibility of more. It opened a greater awareness of depth, and it opened a true space in my heart of magic. And of course, it feels that way because when you're communicating with someone who is no longer in their body, it is magical, it is mysterious, and it is everything that is expansive. But what surprised me is the deep healing that happened on this path. And that's what I want to talk about today, because I don't think that you need to be a medium to understand some of this deep healing, but I want to share some of the stories and things that did change and transpire for me. As a student in mediumship, I went into random classes with random teachers. I started from a place of not knowing anything. If you know my story, you know that spirit started showing up for me after I had a spiritual awakening that began with meditation. But when it happened, I could see, feel, hear, understand everything that what you would call a ghost or a spirit was saying to me. And it worked like that for a while, and I was overwhelmed. Again, I was coming from a place of reacting to everything, trying to always find power. And when this happened, I was so thrown off. I was like, I need support. I need to figure out why this is happening and what I'm supposed to do with it. And so I sought out teachers. I think my first group of teachers was psychic teachers. They have a podcast that really was instrumental for me at the beginning of my journey. Samantha and Deb, and they were, no, Samantha, yeah, Samantha and Deb. And they really helped me just understand a little bit more about the world of spirit. But then I took a mediumship class. And in that class, I started opening up to learning how to do a reading, learning how to understand the world of spirit as they would come in and as they would share information with me, what I was supposed to do with it. And as a student, one of the biggest blessings and the scariest experiences is doing readings with other students who are going through the same thing. it's amazing because you're completely vulnerable, communicating with the spirit world and sharing that information with someone across from you. And you might be completely wrong or completely right, but it was extremely vulnerable, very overwhelming. And I never really knew what I was doing. Now, as a teacher, I understand how important that time period is, that vulnerability, that openness, that fear, and being able to sit with yourself and love yourself through it is one of the most powerful experiences that we can go through. Because it's like, I think of it as dancing, where when you learn how to dance, you don't go from basically not being able to find the first beat to being a ballroom dancer, right? You have to look like a fool. You have to like allow yourself to learn. You have to allow yourself to experience newness, to experience being clumsy, to experience learning from someone else who does things in a really beautiful, graceful way. And so as a mediumship student, that was like an instrumental part for me. I was always afraid of being vulnerable because I didn't want to look like a fool. I was always afraid of being vulnerable because I didn't want someone to underestimate me. So I was always trying to like harness like this false sense of security by having a false sense of power and control. In mediumship, you can't do that because if you do that, you stay in your mind and you can't access your heart and your spirit to communicate. And so just that experience alone was transformational for me. And as someone who developed my mediumship for years, it was a journey that I went through. Every single time I sat with someone else practicing readings, every single time I allowed myself to be completely open, completely wrong, or completely right and powerful in communication. So that was one of the first aspects of the deep healing that happened for me. And even to this day continues to happen for me because the vulnerability and the openness and the expansion in mediumship, once you lose that, you stop being a medium. So you have to keep that openness and that awareness to be able to connect and stay out of your mind. So if you are a student right now and you're listening to this, know that this part of your journey is one of the most important parts of the journey in mediumship, and you don't need to rush through it because there is experience that the Great Spirit wants you to have through this vulnerability of communication. So just sink into it. Keep trying to go back to your heart space. Keep trying to go back to a state of openness and expansion and letting go of the judgment of yourself or others. The other thing that happened to me as a student was healing from people in my life that had passed and that I struggled with as a human. So let me explain what that means. As a young girl, this is going to be a story for you. As a young girl, I lived in a very small town in the Midwest. And it was in the 80s and 90s. I know I'm just aging myself. I'm in my mid 40s. Um, and I'm just going to be really honest. There was a lot of fear and a lot of prejudice around people of different genders, of different sexual orientation. And there was a lot of fear around like gay people, specifically queer people, when I was younger. And I didn't feel that way inside of myself, but I was so insecure in myself, I didn't know how to stand up for people. And that is something I struggled with for a very long time. I have a very specific memory of this beautiful girl. I'll call her Elle. And I was in the seventh grade, I believe. So I was like 12, 13 years old. And she was new to our school and she was queer and she didn't have any friends. And I really wanted to be her friend because I felt her. I felt her loneliness. I felt her heart. And I didn't know how to be her friend because I was so afraid of being judged myself. And even talking about this story makes me emotional because I just wish I could go back to that girl that I was and have found the strength and the courage, right? But I remember one day standing in the hallway, and all of my friends and I were on one side of the hallway, and we were waiting for a class or something like that. And she was alone on the other side of the hallway, directly across from me. And I smiled at her, and she immediately looked down at her feet. And she, had short, spiky hair, and she was wearing a vest, and she was super cool. And I couldn't figure out how to walk across the hall and just stand by her and put my arm around her, anything. It's what I wanted to do, but I couldn't do it. Fast forward a couple of years, and she only lasted at our school for like 3 months. Oh my gosh. And fast forward a couple of years, and I remember thinking about her and knowing that her father had taken his own life, and how horrible. I just felt how horrible that must have been for her. And about 20 years ago, I found out that she had taken her life. This sat with me in so much heaviness and so much sorrow, because I felt like I just didn't have enough internal love of myself, even to reach out to her that one day in the hallway and be her friend, like I knew I wanted to do. And for years, I grappled with this. And I don't even know if I've talked about this to anyone except for mediumship students, but I would talk to her. I would say, Laura, oh, I just said her name. I would say her name, and I would just talk to her and say, I'm so sorry, and speak to her in my heart. Anyways, so fast forward again to me beginning my mediumship journey. And I was sitting with another new student, and I had just given her a reading, and it was really good, actually. I remember it because it was the beginning of my journey, and things would come so quickly to me. And it was her turn to give me a reading. And the first thing she said was, I'm seeing a young girl with short, spiky hair, and she's not showing me her death. And I know that it was taken by herself. And I immediately started crying. And I said, oh my gosh, this girl showed up for me in this reading. And in the reading, I finally had a chance to say to her how deeply sorry I was. And she said that she had heard me talking to her all those years and forgave me. And she was so beautiful in this reading, and she came through so crystal clear. When that happened, I was able to forgive myself as a person who didn't know at the time how to be the person I am now. And it was one of the most profoundly healing experiences that I had had as a mediumship student. And that is another thing that happens with mediumship, how it changes everything. My heart finally felt peace with hers. My heart finally felt peace in loving myself. My heart felt forgiven, and I was able to move forward with something that I had been carrying for decades. And even though I was just a little girl at the time, I carried that with me. So in that experience, what happened was, all of a sudden, the world got a little bit bigger for me, because I realized that this woman who was giving me the mediumship reading, the other student, had no idea about my story. She knew nothing. Literally, we met that day on Zoom and had never seen each other before in our lives. And that was the first thing that she said. And the only way that I would have been able to identify her was by her short, spiky hair, or if she said her name. And she knew that. She knew that. It was unbelievable. And so seeing and feeling the world in a way of understanding that there are forces unseen happening around us all the time, and that little old me, little Erika, who used to struggle for a false sense of power and security, was able to be vulnerable enough to receive that deep healing and connection with someone who could have hated me, because I hated myself for that. So I had this moment of love for myself and for the possibility that came through mediumship. The connection that happens outside of readings is amazing as well. And that's something else that really surprised me with mediumship development, is that after I started opening my heart and my spirit and my soul, and then my awareness into something other than the three-dimensional realm, I started recognizing that there is connection waiting for us all the time. I started talking to God in a different way. I started realizing that I go internal, inside of my soul, inside of my heart, and I expand there, and that is where everything begins, because I am a drop of the ocean. The ocean lives inside of me, and I am a drop of divinity, and divinity lives inside of me. And so the more I went into my heart and expanded from there, the bigger I could expand into understanding the divinity of everything. One time God said to me, "Look for me in everything, for there I am. Look for me in everything, for there I am." And in that moment, I recognized that every single thing that happens that is divine. If we shift and open our perspective to that divinity, I could talk to blades of grass and receive messages from the grass. I could talk to trees and feel the life force moving through the tree. I started recognizing that nothing dies. Even when a tree is burnt down in a forest fire, the roots are connected to the roots of other trees, and the energy shifts and moves and adjusts, and that life force is recreated in another way. And so when you start opening in the world of mediumship and you start recognizing this shifting frequency and energy and vibration that allows you to communicate with other spirits who are no longer in their human form, you start recognizing that everything is a spirit, no matter what form it is in. And so maybe you've been a tree, maybe you've been a flower, maybe you've been a star pulsing in the sky. And right now, your human form is what we see and recognize. And so noticing the magic in daily life became something that shifted the way that I lived. I started recognizing, even in my greatest perceived enemy, which is a made-up story anyhow, but maybe a political leader that I feel isn't showing love, I could find the divinity in that person and start speaking to that, from love to love, from heart to heart, from divine being to divine being. Maybe they don't recognize their divinity, but my job is to recognize it. My job is to find it and look at it and breathe life into it as I breathe life into myself. I started recognizing that self-love is the beginning, the end, and the everything. When you can love the ocean inside of yourself, the drop of divinity that we are, that is everything, and you can love it so deeply, all of a sudden you're looking for that in others to just connect on a force of love. And that, I've realized, has been the greatest healing activity that I can do, because then I'm not spewing ugliness and ignorance and hate into the world. Instead, I am saying, I recognize your beauty, and that is who I am going to see. That is what I'm going to breathe in and out, and that is what I am going to become myself. And I recognize all those things that I hate about other people were actually things that I didn't like about myself. The greed that I would see in myself, the power struggle I would see inside of myself, or the parts of myself that I would hide in shame, became parts of myself that I allowed myself to see so that I could heal them, so that I could be an evolved soul, so that I could be someone that I was proud of. And this is because mediumship development taught me this. There's a clear connection that happens with mediumship development and communicating with our higher self. Because when you're communicating with other spirits on the other side, what's happening is it's not your mind that's communicating with spirits on the other side, our loved ones that have passed. It's our heart. And our heart has to be connected to our highest spiritual self in order to be able to do this work. And so when I connected to my higher self, I was able to expand my energy enough to connect with my team of helpers in spirit who have been with me, my angels, my guides, the divine teachers that are here for all of us. I've been able to access them. And not feeling alone in life has been something that I never really experienced before. I used to feel lonely, even in relationship, even as any sort of person I identified with, what I was doing, I would feel this loneliness that I don't feel anymore because I feel the pulse of the divine all around me. I feel the angels. I feel my guides. And I'm like, oh my God, we're not alone. I feel my ancestors. I feel my grandmother right now. I feel a friend who passed like 25 years ago over here. And I know I am not alone. And I know that they want us to succeed in life. And what does succeed mean? They want us to find our hearts so that we can grow the love and the compassion in this world. And that's what they're cheering for us. They're wanting us to find the way. I had a reading the other day, and this person's guides were coming through, and they were talking about the simplest answers for this person who was struggling. And I'm not going to say anymore because I don't want to give any identifiers, but literally they wanted this person to go inside to find the answers and to go inside and know thyself, because that's where the peace was. And they're here supporting us. There's one thing that happens with mediumship that I've been surprised by too. And this is an interesting aspect, but it's the seduction of death, the seduction of going home, the idea of, yes, this life is hard, and I know I'm living an experience in it, and I can feel my higher self in the other realms and know what like true life is. And this has been something that's surprising because even a friend of mine spoke with me about it the other day. She asked me if I felt that. And I said, yeah, there is a seduction of knowing that when I die, this physical death, that I will be back home and I will be in this place of beauty that I long for in this life. And I have an understanding now because I've done so many readings that I see what the other side is like and what people are going through and how they're changing and growing and evolving and ascending. And it's just like this beautiful energy that is a medium that I get to tap into. And I am so grateful for it. I love it. I revere it. I honor it so much. And sometimes I'm like, oh, imagine what that will feel like. And I'm so excited, even though I love my life. I love this journey. I love the experiences and the gaining of wisdom and the joy and my children and my husband and like my friends and like the richness of my soul as a human. I love it. And yet there is this seduction. And what I've realized that the most beautiful thing that you can give yourself is meditation, because in meditation, literally you escape the confines of your body and your spirit is free and you are able to connect into these realms of heaven, of higher love, of the divine, of the angels, of the cosmos. And that has been something that it's almost like recharging my battery. And it is the greatest secret that everybody needs to know, is that you can transform your life through meditation. You can transform your soul, your spirit. Your identity doesn't matter anymore. And I just touch heaven touching the cosmos in meditation is exhilarating. And maybe you'll never be a medium because that's not your path, but you can meditate and be in contact with your true divinity. These are some of the things that have changed me in ways that I had no idea were possible. I love who I am, and I'm constantly learning something new about other people, about the world of spirit, about the beauty of this earth and the magic that is around us in everything. God said, again, look for me everywhere, for there I am. So in these times where things feel really dark and really heavy, start looking for the divinity and attaching yourself to that. You will find yourself in it and then love it even more. Love yourself even more for a direct pathway for spreading love around the world, because you live in the world as the world lives in you. And the more you can love yourself, the more you can easily love others. So in the darkness of this world, find a way to keep loving this world. Find a way to keep breathing in life into this world. Find a way to keep breathing in hope in yourself so that naturally that pours out of you for others. We are connected deeply on this web. We are all connected to each other. Sending you all so much love.